Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I'm going to be talking about nothing in particular. I've wanted to record another Woolgathering video since the 2nd of October because I like to record them in my car on a Saturday before work when I have a bit of extra time before anybody else arrives and usually can count on the car park being empty. Well, due to the new temporary traffic lights that are on one of the main roads getting to work, I end up taking a fair bit longer to get there, so I haven't been able to. And last Tuesday, when I was going to record my wrap-up of September, the BookTube Prize and a Woolgathering video, my father and brother came home, recorded the BookTube Prize wrap-up on Thursday, still waiting to edit that, and then didn't have a day off until Sunday, couldn't record in my car on Saturday again, and now we're here. Do we need a bit of hair to show that whilst I do have a receding hairline, it's not too bad yet? So you think, Charlie, you wanted to record a Woolgathering video, there must be so much that you have to talk about. The thing is that actually I did have plenty of things that I wanted to talk about, but it's been so long that I've forgotten tons of them. But one of them that has stuck in my mind whenever I've thought about this video is discussing the reviewing of memoir fiction. And what place does that have here, considering I don't really read that much memoir on this channel? I have been seeing a lot online people talk about non-fiction and how they find it difficult to review and rank memoir, namely for the BookTube Prize, but I also see this thing perpetuated throughout Instagram. And I just have to say that good memoir reads like good fiction. When a person writes memoir, they are going to use and employ the techniques from fiction in order to engage you as the reader. You are not reviewing the experiences within that book. You are reviewing how those experiences were conveyed. Once again, such as when you are reviewing fiction, you are not reviewing the writer, you are reviewing their work. The same stands for memoir. If you've ever taken a memoir writing class, then you will be taught about employing all the same tools and what have you to write memoir. Also, memoir is structured in a certain type of way that the events might not have happened sequentially, or if they have, events are picked and chosen based on the effect they will have on the reader in order to tell a story. You are not getting a full blow-by-blow account of a person's life. You are getting the cherry-picked moments that best tell the story that the author wishes to tell. A memoir writer is still an author at the end of the day. They want their reader to stick with their book the entire way through, and there are certain narrative techniques used in order that you will do so. Therefore, when you say you can't review a memoir, it's more of a worry of you being... Well, I suppose I can understand it. I can understand when you say you can't review memoir because you're thinking that you might have read something particularly traumatic for a person, and so you might feel bad about doing so. But once again, you're reviewing the way they presented their history as opposed to reviewing them as a person or reviewing what has gone on in their life. It's quite easy to appreciate and feel sympathetic towards something bad that might have happened in a person's life and separate it from the writing. At least it is in my book. But then I am a grumpy old northerner with a penchant for being bitter and upsetting people. I'm so glad to have said that as well, because that has been sticking in my mind for over a week now. It feels good to get that off my chest. Now, it is Tuesday, the something of October. I say something because I can't be sure. I think it's the 12th. And I'm feeling particularly sneezy today. I don't think that I've caught a German customer's cold. I think that I haven't taken any allergy medication today, and for whatever reason, my body seems to be allergic to everything. I've also decided to change the next scene that I have to write for the final Doris book. But this is what I do often. Basically, I reached a scene and I didn't know how to write it. So I did that old-fashioned thing that I usually do and decide to get rid of the scene, send Harold off somewhere else and Doris off somewhere, and then have the scene happen off-page and have someone come back and tell Harold about it so that I can cut out any of the little niggly bits that I couldn't get to and couldn't figure out how to write. I just need the actual time to write that now. It's weird that when I'm in work as I am now, so last week I worked Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and I'm doing the same thing here this week, so it's day in, day off, day in, day off, and then in. And so when I've only got those 2 days in the week, and last Thursday I finally managed to make it back to the writers group after 4 weeks away from them, I'm not really finding the time in which to get much writing done. Admittedly, did write last Thursday before the writers group, but last Tuesday I was catching up on the YouTube that I needed to do, my wrap-up namely, because I'd wanted to continue this cycle I had of being able to upload quite a lot, but work got in the way. And I'd picked up these Agatha Christie books in the hopes of doing a vlog about that, but Victober hit too quickly. Quite honestly, and I say this a lot, I did not realise that the end of September was there. I am finding, as I think most people are, that time just moves a lot quicker. And I put it into terms for someone last week when I was talking about how I quite like having I call it a lackadaisical lifestyle. I suppose it's actually a more laid-back lifestyle where I say to people, it is the way I've got to live, really. I can't cope as my sister can. My sister really thrives on stress and having stuff to do. I can't do that. If you put a lot of pressure on me, I tend to retreat. Whereas she's the opposite. She'll like grab every opportunity thrown her way, and I'm like, no, keep it to what you can manage. Although, quite honestly, that's not working out for me. But anyway, I said, I lead a rather lackadaisical lifestyle, and the world continues to move quickly around me. So whilst I can be over here, and in my mind I'm still in March, the world is in October. And whilst I'm enjoying the weather and the fact that I'm getting to wear my jumpers again, I'm still over here in March thinking that time hasn't gone, things haven't gone on too long. Like, next year, it will be 2022. I'll be turning 30, and isn't that something to worry about? Not really. But I realised it's been 3 years since the Doris novella, which means next year it will have been 5 years since I released Indisputably Doris, and I still haven't got the final book out, and it will also be 2 years since An Heir to Murder, which means it has been 4 years since I finished writing that first draft of the book. And I don't like to stress myself out, but I do find myself mildly terrified. And, you're all great people. I mention this, and more often than not, I'll get a message saying, that's fine. Take as much time as you need. You want it to be the best that it can be. And the writers at the writers group understand, and they say to me, it's got to be difficult writing the final book and knowing that you've got to tie things up. I'm like, well, I forgot that. I forgot that you've got to tie anything up when it comes to endings. So if you wanted to know, currently we're in the final chapter of Royally Doris, and no ends have been tied up. None. It doesn't feel... I'm actually apparently just treating this like another chapter. But certain people who are just readers off the street, who don't know me, say to me, "You've not finished that book yet?" And a customer went, you had a holiday to get that book finished and you didn't do it. Like, no, I didn't. Listen, Linda, it takes me a lot longer than I thought it was going to. Harold got very grandiloquent at the age of 76. But yeah, I've also still got plans, which I've had since March. I watched a video, a Woolgathering video from April. It's when I'd taken the month off and I came back, and I was talking about how I decided I definitely couldn't write the next Alice book straight after Royally Doris. I needed a break from series fiction. I just wanted to write a standalone where I knew that I'd be done. And if you didn't know, in An Heir to Murder, I introduced this mystery that's going to run throughout the series, which is, where is Joanna Rollinshead? Or what happened to Joanna Rollinshead, who is Duke's niece, who went missing in 1990-something. Firstly, I was a bit silly and didn't realise how old that would make her. And then, another issue that I ran into is that I keep writing things into Doris, and I keep writing things and thinking, is that where she is? I also know that certain characters from the Doris books, because they're all set in the same place, based on the plans I've got for the series, certain characters from Doris and certain things are going to crop up in the Alice Valentine books. They're set in the same place. And so, I mean, we've already got Greenfields Hall in An Heir to Murder, which is where in Indisputably Doris, a certain scene takes place at Christmas and is... I was about to spoil... I nearly spoiled Royally Doris. It's difficult. It's difficult not to spoil your own books, but something happens anyway, basically, in Royally Doris to do with Greenfields Hall, which, as I was writing it, I was like, this has a direct effect on the mystery of Joanna Rollinshead now. So now I've written myself into a corner there where I'm going to have to go back and look at this flaming timeline I have to see whether that actually fits, because one of the problems I've got is that there are now 4 Doris books, and there are, well, there's 10 Alice books planned, but I was going to originally have this series arc go over 10 books, and I just want to get it over and done within 5, because I can't cope with the Doris and Alice books intertwining anymore. It was difficult enough with An Heir to Murder, which is why when Alice turns up at Doris's house in An Heir to Murder, I always knew that there was going to be this connection to the Doris books and Alice, because there are serious things that happened in Doris's life that I felt like I couldn't talk about in the Doris books because these were meant to be comedies, so I shoved them into An Heir to Murder instead. So I always knew that scene was going to be there, but because I couldn't figure out how I was going to put Doris into this book, and because I want to keep them as separate entities as well, when Alice turned up to Doris's house, I had to be like, okay, where can she be at this point? So I just sent her off to Chester. And I know that the next book has a very big thing to do with a cruise in there. Doris Ahoy is set on a cruise. So now I've got to figure out whether Doris is on this flaming cruise ship or not, or whether it's just something else entirely. And I've also got to figure out when I'm setting this, because I am thinking of aging up Alice Valentine, because when I came up with her character, she was older than me, and now she's younger than me. In fact, she should be 31 now, and in the next book I'm writing, she's going to be 26. I don't suppose I could just write them extremely quickly next year, you know, once I've finished Doris, just try and rush out an Alice book once a month. I know that I can't do that, it's just a dream that I'd be able to get them done and then I could say goodbye to this storyline. I make it sound like I'm really tired of it, but I'm not. It's one of those where I'm just excited about it, but also recognise it's going to be a lot of work. And if I pull it off, fantastic. And if I don't, well, I know some pretty terrible indie authors anyway, and they're doing perfectly well, very successful. Wow, I did really talk for a long time about nothing there. What else do I want to talk about today? There was more, I'm sure. We had a particularly busy day at work on Saturday. I know you'll love hearing about the charity shop. So, each week we have a bit of a target. It's not a target set to us by head office, it's a target I came up with myself. And if we hit this number, I'm happy. And if we don't hit this number, I sacrifice a mouse to the sun god, Geraldine. That's a lie. I very much believe in animal rights and I would not sacrifice a mouse. I would probably slice open a tea bag. Anyway, we had to make a certain figure on Saturday, which was particularly high. Recent weeks we've seen sales go down a bit, which has meant that, well, we haven't really been hitting this target we've got for ourselves. But Saturday, it was busy as heck, and I was thrilled by it. I say I was thrilled. I was also, for whatever reason, on Saturday in this incredibly languid mood, and I've talked about it before. I haven't actually been to work when this has happened. I've been very fortunate about that. And I've talked about calling it that Wednesday feeling before, where really I am not ill, I am not unhappy, but I described it to someone on Saturday as it feels like I am 3 feet behind my eyes. It's one where I can't really cope with loud noises, and I really just want it to be somewhat of a gentle day. It's kind of like the entire day for me is a bit like just wading through fog. Not like a brain fog, but it's just, I feel like I'm gently ebbing. And so this happened at work, so I was very grateful to just be on the till because I couldn't cope anywhere else, I don't think. Yeah, someone turned up at my front door and we put a good bike outside and he just came and bought it, £100 straight away. My manager had gone to her and she'd reduced some stuff, so that all came to the till paid for. And we'd made more than we'd been making in a day by 1 o'clock. And so at the end of the day, we'd made the most we've probably made in a day since we came out of lockdown in April. Now, I know everywhere usually does better on a Saturday, but it was particularly fantastic for it to happen on a day when we really needed to sell a load of stuff. And also, I feel like if you make a lot of money and you're happy, then your manager's going to be happy too. Although I do have tons of paperwork to do when I get in tomorrow. I've been putting it off and putting it off, and it really should have all been done yesterday. So, I've been putting off this paperwork, and it should have all been done by yesterday, so. It's actually my manager's paperwork. My manager just doesn't do the paperwork, so I do the paperwork. Also, Poems and Pints is back tomorrow night, which we haven't had since... Oh! Yeah, it was March 2020. Yeah, we had the last Poems and Pints, and a lot of people didn't turn up. And then a week later, well, not even a week, we went into our first national lockdown. And so we're starting that again tomorrow night, which will also be the first time that I've gone to it from work. and we also need to talk to them tomorrow because our writers have expressed an interest in returning and doing a Christmas reading, and that's the one that I usually get to compare. I get to lead that, and I've led the last 4 or 5 of those. It used to be, we used to do them in the King Edward Street Chapel in Macclesfield, which is a Unitarian chapel, and the only thing they ever asked of us was to be respectful of the environment of it being a chapel. And then, for whatever reason, well, I think we decided to be faithful to Button Warehouse in Macclesfield as well. So if you're ever in the Macclesfield area, and or if you're a local poet, then we do hold these monthly. And well, I say we, Joy Winkler, former Cheshire Poet Laureate, whose book Morgan I held up here a few weeks ago, and if you haven't bought it yet, why not? Hosts these. And yeah, I haven't got any poetry for it. I haven't written any poetry in over a year, which is really bad because considering, trade secret for you. Last year, I'd hoped to release 3 books. I wanted to release An Heir to Murder, the Final Doris book, and a poetry collection. The Final Doris book didn't happen, but I do have a lot of poems written. But because we were how we were, I decided to avoid releasing the poetry collection until we'd come out of a lockdown and I would be able to tour again. I still have over 100 copies of all my books. I think I have about 500 books under my bed that I really need to sell. But anyway, I haven't written any new poetry. I've written lyrics, but you can't really go to a poems night. You can't really go and read lyrics, especially when they're not particular. Well, I think they're okay, but I don't think other people are going to think they're okay, and I certainly don't want to read some of them in front of my mother. So I have to come up with something to read for that by tomorrow night, and also start writing poetry again. But I'm not going to start writing poetry again until I finish this Flaming Doris book. No. I need to finish this Doris book. I need to do it. I pushed it off. It was originally going to be by April 2020. Then it was June 2020, September 2020. Then it didn't matter. April 2021, June 2021. I seem to go for certain months when I think that it gives me enough time to be able to release it by a certain point. So I wrote Indisputably Doris by February 2017 and released it in September because something fell through with the person who, well, I say person, she's my friend. A friend of mine edited Our Doris. Then things got in the way of Indisputably Doris, so Joy edited Indisputably Doris. I edited Doris Ahoy completely on my own and nobody read that before I released it. Dane of Dane Reads edited An Heir to Murder, and I was going to hire Dane to do Royally Doris, but I'm in 2 minds about that, not because I don't like Dane's work, but because Dane has read and reviewed every single Doris book, and I know that he'd feel compromised if he edited Royally Doris, and so I won't get to hear his thoughts. But I do particularly like seeing what people think of my books, because I'm selfish like that. We'll see. Letting you in on another secret there. Also, probably shouldn't discuss Dane without speaking to him first. Oh well. Please don't sue me. Anyway, I've rambled on about nothing, and I feel like there should have been more for me to say. Have I listened to any new music? I can't say that I have. Have I mentioned Kyla LaGrange returning with a song set? Yeah, I've done that. The music video's now out. That was what I wanted to talk about, yes. So, many moons ago, when I was still at university, so how long ago is this? This will be 9 to 10 years ago now. Kyla LaGrange's album, Ashes, came out. And when I listened to that, it coincided with when I'd had an idea for a short story involving a selkie. And so this was the first thing I took into my final year of uni, and people rather enjoyed that story, and I ruined it all when, after critiquing people, because I'm a really harsh critter. I'm really harsh when it comes to critiquing people, and yeah. So anyway, I ended up being heavily inspired when I decided to turn the short story into a novel. And Ashes by Kyla LaGrange, really, the songs in there, they inspired the entire tone and even certain scenes of this novel. This was back when I used to get very heavily inspired by music. Indeed, when I first wrote a young adult novel in 2007-2008, I was quite inspired by Britney Spears' Circus album. The selkie novel I wrote for NaNoWriMo one year. I also rewrote it at some point. Stole the title from Florence and the Machine, who stole that from Frida Kahlo. What the Water Gave Me. Wouldn't be called that anymore. Kyla LaGrange comes out with this Set You Free music video a few weeks ago. And there's a scene involving water in it. And I was watching it. And all I could think about was my selkie novel from a few years ago. It was nearly a decade now. And one of my friends from uni, we were speaking, and she even mentioned the selkie novel to me. And we talk about this selkie novel all the time. It's the one thing that I think people remember me for. I've been asked about it by people who used to come to the writers group. And the fact of the matter is, I don't even know whether I will ever actually write this thing, because I remember one criticism I received at the time was that I was too young to write that book. And I'm older. I actually agree with that estimation. I was too young to be writing this book because I hadn't yet had any of the life experiences, so I couldn't properly clutch onto anything or display what these emotions would be. And the way it would have gone was I was inspired by a TV show called White Heat, where each episode took place 7 years after the first. So considering selkies within the mythology and folklore that I was looking at only appeared at certain times, I was going to set it every 7 years, and the selkie was going to remain the same age, but the young man would obviously age and have a life, and it was going to discuss that. It's been 10 years and I don't know whether I'll write that. Saying that, I first had an idea for a book entitled A Prior Commitment in 2014 after reading Mrs Palfrey at the Claremont. Or was that 2000? No, it was... I wrote it, I think, in 2014 and then figured out how to change it after reading Mrs Palfrey at the Claremont. And that still isn't written. The next book that I'm planning on writing after Our Doris, the standalone, comes from the charity shop radio play that I wrote at uni. So that's nearly a decade ago as well. And there are a lot of ideas in the pipeline that basically happened over a decade ago, and they're just all sitting in a notebook waiting to be written. Some of them even get crossed out and eliminated when I realise I no longer have the want to write them. Or some of them, it was a big thing in Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, where she says some people all have the same ideas as you, and she sees ideas as being things that if you don't pay attention to them, they'll go to somebody else. And sometimes I think that's happened because there'll be books that come out and they'll be similar to things I'd had ideas for before, and I'll think, oh, I was going to write that. It happened with The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. but I could never figure out how to write that, which is why I killed off my older detective in An Heir to Murder. Been a lot about writing today, hasn't it? Will I ever write the Selkie story? Again, I do think that my character in that actually inspired Harold a bit, because it was an older gentleman at the beach talking about he was waiting for this Selkie to arrive. But another issue I got with that book was that at the time I was thinking of the Orkney Islands and I never actually made it to Orkney. And then I felt like I didn't want to set it in Orkney because I could never capture the sense that I think that place has, or the idea of an island. Although I think that was it Jess Richards did a really good job with her book Snake Bones. I got rid of that book years ago. There are books about islands anyway that have done it a lot better than I think I could, and I think that I would perhaps move it to the north of England somewhere. I don't know. I'd also have to do a lot of research, and I now wonder whether I would need the breadth of a book that I originally envisaged, and whether it couldn't just be a shorter volume, or whether I've not already said what I would have said in that book in the Doris books. At the time I was thinking a lot about change, and how if you remain in the same place you might stagnate and the world will continue to develop around you. Would you want to stay in the same place, or would you want to go off and explore new opportunities? Apparently Charlie decided to stay in the same place, stagnate, and allow the world to go off and explore new opportunities. I'm sorry, younger Charlie. You did have dreams and aspirations, but real life got in the way. Anyway, I'm off because I've been recording for a while, and frankly, I have things to do today. So if you... I hope I didn't bore you with this video, but if I did, you're the fool who sat around and watched it. If you want to talk about what I've talked about today, then feel free to do so in the comments. I will city when I city, because until next time, that is all.